Congratulations, you've just found the #1 over 50 health and wellness podcast on the planet. Hello, and welcome to the Over 50 Health and Wellness Show. I'm your host, Kevin English. I'm a healthy aging expert and the founder of the Silver Edge, and I am on a mission to help men and women just like you build lean, strong, healthy, capable bodies they love for the rest of their lives. All right, folks, let me ask you a tough question. Have you ever felt like no matter how clean you eat or how hard you work out, the fat just won't come off the way it used to? Maybe you're doing all the right things, but the scale won't budge. Or worse, it's creeping in the wrong direction. Frustrating, right? Well, what if the real problem isn't your diet or your workout plan at all, but it's your brain? That's right, your brain might actually be blocking your fat loss. And the good news is, once you understand how your brain works, you can retrain it to become your most powerful fat-burning ally. And that's exactly what today's guest specializes in. Dr. Partick Porter is a world-renowned neuroscience expert. He's the inventor of BrainTap, and he's the author of the upcoming book, Brain Fitness Blueprint. He's been featured everywhere from Wall Street Journal to the Joe Rogan Experience, and he's helped pro athletes, veterans, and high performers rewire their brains for better focus, deeper sleep, and yes, easier fat loss. So today we're diving into the fascinating world of neuroplasticity and brain fitness. Dr. Porter is going to share how you can literally train your brain like a muscle to reduce stress, sleep better, think sharper, and finally unlock the energy and vitality that you need to get lean, strong, and unstoppable in the second half of your life. So whip up your protein smoothies. You're about to learn how to fix your brain so your body can finally follow.
And what we started to realize was that we can train a brain just like you train a muscle. And for all your listeners that are used to doing some kind of physical workouts and getting their body going, that's really good for your brain because you create something called BDNF, brain-derived neurotropic factors. So the best thing to do is after a workout is to sit down quietly, because then you have something called neuroplasticity set in. That's when you get the real change. So any physical exertion, if you can take 5 or 10 minutes, they call it a cool down, or in yoga, they have yoga nidra. That's when I go to India and I speak a lot at the conferences there. We do a lot of research over there because they're so open to it. What they say is the most powerful yoga pose is the corpse pose. That's the one at the end of the thing there. But a lot of people don't realize that there's more neurological work being done while you sleep than when you're awake. But if you don't sleep well, you're not getting that neurological change. So that's why as we get better looking and more intelligent with age, our brain sometimes can lag behind. So we'll give some tips along the way here on what you can do with or without our equipment, because people have been doing this since the dawn of history. The ones that stay, when their brain stays well, there's certain things that they do and they practice. And unfortunately, the American way, I just heard yesterday, it was incredible. He said the average person spends 3 hours on their couch every night. Well,
wow.
And I both, they now say that 20 minutes of sitting equivalent to the health benefits of smoking a cigarette. Now, it's not going to hurt your lungs in the same way, but your physiology is going to be downgraded because you're literally, if you think about these bodies, they're not that old. Even a couple 100,000 years in the scope of history is nothing. So they've never experienced what we've been experiencing here over the last 40 years. You know, our bodies are being assaulted. Usually we're out in nature, we're walking, we're grounded, we're doing all these wonderful things. And our work it's a lot more stressful because every day we didn't know if we're going to be given tomorrow because we're, part of the food chain. All that fear, all that anxiety, and this is something exciting for your listeners. They now know that it's within you right now, and that could be causing your problem. It might not be you. It might be the signals that your body is giving you about your environment, because there's something called epigenetics, which we might be able to get into a little bit too, and how that works. But in 2003, when they mapped the human genome and everybody celebrated, hey, we can figure out, all these different things. They said that 99% of our genes were just junk, right? Well, I always heard God didn't make any junk. So here we go. So in 2018, and this is something for the listeners to understand about the brain and what's going on and the body. They found a whole new system of the body, one that is not in any physiology books, no science books, no anything. It's called the biophotic system. And this is an energy system that supersedes the nervous system. And our NIH calls it the biosphere. There's actually a page, and they say that all illness starts in this field. It's a field of energy because you're giving out energy. You and I, the reason I can see you is you're actually emitting light, just like every other thing in the universe. So And what ours is tied to is something called mitochondria. And I know you're big on metabolic rates. So
Yep.
your metabolic rate is actually, we can measure that. We have a tool that I designed called the NeuroCheck. We can tell you the energy sources. The secret of the mitochondria is to absorb light energy and then spit that light energy out as codes to the body. So it's communicating with the body. Okay. So the better you, in what we found, and we can get into this maybe later, but we found that when you're giving the energy away, like when you're fearful, you're kind of closed in, you actually shut down the mitochondrial action. So negative thinking, fear, anxiety, frustration. Now, it's also key to know for brain function, you need to breathe, right? So that's why breathing techniques. So I can share a few breathing techniques that we teach people to keep their brain fit too, because breath is linked to your nervous system. So all these things got me into it. And I still feel like it's my first day at school and I'm learning because nobody really knows how the brain works still. We got this material, that's 3 to 5 pounds in our head. It's directing everything we do, but we don't really know. We speculate. We see the end result. It's like going fishing, and we don't see them fishing. We just get to see the cooler at the end. Is there any fish in the bait box or whatever? So we want to see. We're getting deeper in. We can measure brainwave activity now. We can measure it across time. We can measure the nervous system function. We can show you why you're stuck. A lot of people don't realize you could be doing. In fact, if you're under stress and you exercise, you have doubled your cortisol capacity. Now
Sure.
you're just going to store fat all day long. I don't care what you do. You've got to first get rid of that's why with Muscle Magazine, I did a whole series called Mind Over Muscle, because those relaxed people in the gym that aren't fearful, that are having a good time, they're just enjoying themselves, their muscles are getting acetylcholine. That's what binds the bone and muscle structure. So this is all controlled by the brain. So we have to get the brain in alignment with our body. And I'm one. So as we go through the conversation here, I believe the number one is nutrition. You cannot think a bad diet. So you can do everything else, but if you're eating total junk, your body has to stop everything it's doing to digest that food. And if it's good food, it can do it efficiently, give you energy and vitality. But if it's poor food, now it's got to rob Peter to pay Paul, and you put yourself behind the 8 ball. Now, number 2 is you got to move and breathe. If you're
Actually, Patrick, let's put a pin in that, because I want to come back and I want to deep dive in all of that. I love the idea that you said you can't outthink a bad diet. We often say you can't outtrain a bad diet. So
that's right. Exactly what I'm saying. So that's a good.
I love that. I love that. But let's back up a little bit, because there's a couple of fascinating things I heard there in just that story of how you've got interested in this and where you are today as an expert in this area. And first thing I just want to highlight is, wow, were your parents ever ahead of the curve, right? So for them to have said, hey, I'm going to reject modern Western medicine and I am going to go to what did you say, to a natural practitioner? I suppose that would have been rather rare in that day. Is that fair?
Oh yeah. I mean, we had to go to Kalamazoo, Michigan. We lived in Battle Creek. There was not even one in our town.
Right.
And it's like a witch doctor or something we were going to.
Yeah.
Like 2 years before that, my grandfather was actually killed with they left a clip in after a heart surgery and he died.
Oh, no.
So, I mean, my mom did not trust medical doctors after that. And she felt like they killed her dad.
Yeah.
So it wasn't hard for her to make that choice. Once she found out, somebody said, but she didn't like us on Ritalin, because I guess she put us on it for a little bit and we were acting like zombies. And she could see that's a lot of people just weren't compliant kids. My mom, who was a hairdresser, but she was a very creative person. She could play any instrument, those kind of things. She was one of those kind of people. She was really open-minded. And my dad was just pretty much drunk all the time. So that was the necessity to get some help. And luckily the Catholic Church came over, a sister and a father, and told my dad, we want you to try this relaxation seminar. And then when my dad did it, and he didn't drink again, because he'd been to AA and all those things. But when he realized he was drinking to try to balance his brain, and there's a really good book called Finding Your Perfect High by John Marshall, where he talks about the person with the addiction is not trying to get high, they're trying to get balanced. So some people do this with sugar and food, and some people do it with exercise. Some if it's healthy, then great. You can do those things. But my dad was finding a negative outlet, and then he was smart enough that, like in our case, he didn't have a chance. Both his parents were addicts of something. My grandma was a head nurse, and she got addicted to the medicine at the hospital, the pills. And my grandfather was an alcoholic. But he got help, and he said, if I'm going to get help, everybody's going to get help. So as a family, we started working on our minds, our mindsets. because we were very negative. I mean, just think about growing up Catholic, you're taught what not to do. All day long, they just tell you what not to do. And the brain doesn't work like that. The brain needs a positive outlet. And so once we started this really what we would call today positive psychology, before it was popular, in my dad, one of the things growing up that I tell people, because my first book is called Awaken the Genius. I've written 10, but my first book is about waking up your brain like it did for me. And there's a story in there where I say I was blessed to be the son of an alcoholic. So the number one thing that most people don't realize is you got to take whatever your greatest liability is, you got to make that your superpower. Whatever it is, you just got to conquer it. The more you elude it, the more you avoid it, the more you deny it, the more power it has over you. So once I realized that I'm not destined to be an alcoholic, I'm now 64 years old. I'm not an alcoholic. I don't think it's going to happen tomorrow. Not that I'm going to start drinking or something like that. But I mean, if I did those behaviors that an alcoholic does, then I'm an alcoholic. But if I don't do those behaviors, number one law of psychology states you can't be a behavior. So when I started getting into making the equipment, it was people don't have enough energy to make changes happen. For the listeners that just kind of understand this, so imagine it's beginning of summer. We take a trail to the store, and that trail, as the grass grows up higher and higher, that trail still stays because every day we're running it. That's like your neurology every day. Now, let's say that somebody says, there's a better way to get to the store. It's over here, but you got to go through all those big weeds first. If you continue to do that every day, and not this one, this called neurogenesis. This way will create a new pathway, and then it's called neural pruning. It will prune this neuron. But it takes energy to do that, right? Energy at the point. And that's why it's so important. Like if I can get somebody exercising and then doing some brain fitness, you're going to see major gains. I mean, there's a book called Saving Your Brain by Dr. Kelly Miller, where he talks about BrainTap, but he also talks about the physical exercise. He has these people that the beginning of the study, it's the 6-week study, they're not able to do a plank. By the end of the time, they're doing a 2-minute plank, and these are people that, and every person in that study was taken off the dementia scale, because when you get your brain is designed to heal just like every other part of the body. The thing is that it takes special care and special exercises. And so we're still looking for more, like I said, nobody knows. We just see the end results of the actions, and we can register those and share them with the world.
All right. Yeah, I absolutely love that. I find that fascinating. And it seems to me what you're describing there is what we're commonly calling neuroplasticity, right? This idea that we can rewire our brains. I love that illustration of we have a path and we have this forest of weeds built up. And that first foray through those weeds is going to be tough. But over time, we build a new path, and maybe that old path starts to grow in, right? And that's a good way of just symbolic way of understanding what neuroplasticity is and how we can, in fact, teach old dogs new tricks, right? So fair enough. Let's see, Patrick, I want to transition here a little bit because you started to talk about nutrition. You've already talked about exercise. There are a couple of notes that I really wanted to hit. Obviously, I'm really high on both of those topics, but I want to talk about the effects of just this modern lifestyle on our brain health. And you've already alluded to this. And I've got a number of areas I want to hit and maybe do a bit of a deep dive as you see fit here. But let's talk about, as I give you these, you tell me just on a scale of like 1 to 10, how critical are these things for brain health? I'm gonna hit you with the first one because you've already started to address it. Nutrition. And when I say nutrition and I say how important is it, keep in mind the context of 70% of the American diet is the standard American diet, which is to say 70% of it is composed of these processed and ultra processed foods. What kind of an impact does that have on brain health?
Well, that's a 10. I mean, that's a
10 out of 10. Okay.
The number one neurotoxin that we take for the brain is sugar. And then you think about gluten and all these other things that affect the brain. And also you talk about EMF and all the things. Your body, there's only 3 reasons you don't have proper brain function: thoughts, traumas, or toxins. So when you think about these foods, I always think about when I used to have my weight loss centers, we used to have a franchise called Positive Changes. And we would tell them it's waste. It's either on your waist or it's in the waste bucket. People need to think more long-term, because most addicts, whether they think themselves an addict or not, that maybe they can't have a meal without dessert, or they can't have their snack in between, and that's a habit that it doesn't serve you. But and usually 30 minutes after that, the shame and the guilt set in anyway. So if they can start thinking a little bit more in advance. So the part of that is just planning it, right? Some people say they plan to fail and some people fail to plan, right? So,
Mm.
but this is part of the brain fitness journey, is your brain is doing this anyway. Every night when you go to sleep, it's processing all your daily activities, coordinating them against the history of time, all your experiences, which ones are most important, which ones are meaningless. It's doing the neural pruning, it's doing the neurogenesis, it's doing the neuroplasticity. It's literally setting your brain up for tomorrow. And Deepak Chopra, who's one of the people I trained with over the years, he said 97% of what we're going to do tomorrow we know about today. So what are we pretending not to know? So with food, we have to plan to be successful, because if we let appetite run our life instead of hunger, then we start eating foods that are going to be destructive to our body. And that's going to put our body, when we digest food, anybody who has you know what an HRV monitor is, right? You wear the rings or the watches and things like
Yep.
that.
Yep.
Anyone listening, if you look at that before you eat, and then you look at it after you eat, you're going to see your HRV goes way down. And that's because all the energy in the system went from muscles, ligaments, and tendons in balance, which you need out there in the jungle or whatever, to forge and do everything what the body thinks you're going to do. It says, we can't do those things right now because we've got to digest this meal. And it can take up to 4 hours to get into second phase digestion, which is when you start burning fat. That's what your brain needs. So if you don't ever get to the second phase of digestion, you're not feeding your brain ketones. So you're going to have cravings for sugar. And now at first that's a little difficult, right? Because the habit of doing it, it's kind of like reaching out and shaking somebody's hand, but you're in a different culture. They don't shake hands. You keep wanting to shake their hand. They go, I don't do that. That connections. Our brain is always looking for those connections. So with food, if we can start connecting that food is energy, I always say anything comes in a can, bottle, or wrapper with ingredients you can't read, you probably can't digest. So giving them an easy way to think about it. I said, so 70% of your food should be God labels,
Yeah.
fresh alive foods. And then whatever serves you, but then you have to supplement, because even if you eat the greatest foods on earth today, it's not going to give you. When I saw the one statistic showed that an orange, it would take 20 oranges from today to equal the vitamin C content they had in 1980.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. We've covered that pretty well on this in past episodes here. Just that whole, now we're talking about soil health, and that just because of big agriculture, that soil's basically dead. That's not nutrient dense the way it was in our grandparents' time. Therefore, even if you're going to the health food store down the road and you're buying the organic spinach, and say in my case, I'm on the East Coast and it was shipped in from the West Coast and it was grown in some giant agricultural factory farm, that spinach has nowhere near the nutrient density, again, that our grandparents would have eaten. So yeah. All right. So I love that. I love that you start with sugar as, hey, let's cut this out. That's not doing our brain any help. These highly processed foods, if we could just reverse those. So a good prescription there, something we could do right away to boost our brain health as well as our overall metabolic physical health as well. Next up, go ahead.
A couple tips though that are even easier. Think in terms of green leafy vegetables, but replace your salad dressing with olive oil, because those are the omegas you need. And they found that it will reduce your chances of dementia by 40%. And then put a little Italian seasoning on it. And then think of your fruits and vegetables. Anything you can do that's purple or blue in color, those are better for the brain. So just when you're shopping, if you're looking for brain foods.
Green, purple, and blue. Yeah. And get those omega-3 fatty acids, right? Love it. Absolutely love it. All right. The next one you alluded to was exercise, movement. So what is, and again, the context of the standard American, you had mentioned a shocking statistic, which I hadn't heard, but the average American spends 3 hours a night on the sofa. And I'm going to guess that the average American spends most of their day in a seated position as well. We drive to work, we sit at desks, we do what you and I are doing, right? We're rather sedentary in this moment. What effect does that have on the brain? If we're going to say that a scale of 1 to 10, how important is movement, or
some
where
form
does
of
that fall?
some form of movement every day is essential. I mean, it's got 10, your muscles will atrophy. Think of every muscle like a chemical factory that's feeding you those neurotransmitters you need to feel healthy and strong and vibrant and positive. We all know the person that was like a Debbie Downer and then started working out. They became this positive, upbeat person. It's because exercise turns on those feel good, happy hormones and all the things your body needs. but it needs muscle function, and that's mitochondrial action or energy at the cellular level. So this all drives into the brain because the brain is what moves everything. Your muscles don't move without the brain saying move. So
Yeah.
if we balance the brain, get the brain in, so we could do those together. Remember, you're going to create BDNF anyway, but if you want to have a lot of it, because think of it like throwing gasoline on a fire. Your cells, you want to create more and more ATP. This is the currency of the body that builds it. Movement. I've had a lot of my friends, because we do a lot of work, like when we work with Alan Guerrero, Tom Brady's PT, they have everybody wear our BrainTap while they're doing the movement therapy because it moves the brain, because there's a connection. If the connection between the brain and body isn't there, most of what we do, there's a brainwave called SMR, sensory motor rhythm. This is your vestibular system. We've shown that we can create better balance through brainwave entrainment. But if we add in this cross training, we have a board, a balance board that we have people work on, and then we measure their balance, because this is the biggest determiner that shows are you going to have dementia or not. Your balance is key. Now, why would that be? Because our body knows if we don't have purpose or a plan, why does it exist? That's why so many people, unfortunately, if they don't have a plan for their life, they retire and expire 5 years after retirement because they don't have a long-term plan. What are you doing? How are you, sir? And our body naturally we need to work our body. We don't need to overwork it. And in fact, I was just on Fox News doing a whole blitz because they did this whole thing Penn State did, where they showed how walking improves brain function. And so movement, they say movement is life. So, even if you're sitting watching TV every 20 minutes at least, get up during commercials or something and do some bends and some stretches and some movement, get your body going. If you can eat after a meal, now you've accelerated your metabolism, and help your digestion. Now, I'm not talking about going out and doing sprints, but that's another thing that's frightening. They say the average person after 35 years old never sprints again.
Yeah, I've seen that statistic. I'm with you. That's a horrifying statistic.
Yeah. And we're designed to sprint. We're not
we are.
Run those long distances. When I ran back in college, and the worst part was having to run that 8-mile warm up during spring training, because I was built more for sprinting, not for distance running. But that's because our bodies aren't designed that way. And that's why the knees go out and things like that. But walking, a nice walk, keep moving, breathing, because it's hard to, if you're walking, you got to be breathing. So the key is the breath work also is part of that equation to keep and most people don't realize your breath is linked to two systems of the body that are super critical. One is called the parasympathetic system. That's the one we want to activate during sleep, relaxation, recovery, those kind of things. And then there's the sympathetic. Well, if you're in sympathetic drive, meaning that you are stressed out to the max and you go work out, this is not a good thing. Your body is already full of cortisol. You're already raging with all the negative hormones. And now you go to work out. Now you're stressing not only mentally, you're stressing your body physically. So it's really good to clear your mind. That's why, like in Zen, they say, when you're eating, eat, when you're swimming, swim, be present with what you're doing. So that's part of the key to brain fitness too, is when you're moving, some of those thoughts don't stay. Because some people, like you'll see people get angry and they go, I gotta go for a walk. Well, they know that's because their body can process that memory and process it through the body, somatically through the body, because your body is a thinking body. It's not like disconnected from your brain. It's just your brain tells it what to do, but there's signals going on all the time. But if we're holding on to that anger, that fear, that frustration, think of those. What's most in common with all negative emotional states? Do you know? Breathing. You can't stay angry if you breathe. We've all had little kids, like my grandkids or my kids when they were younger. When they come up and they'd be all mad, I'd say, breathe, breathe. They wouldn't stop because they knew as soon as they started breathing, the anger would be gone. So if we can learn to breathe through these difficult situations, that's part of the movement thing. It moves this system, the body, it moves you from the sympathetic drive, which we need, but we don't need it all the time, over into parasympathetic. Because when we need to relax, we need to be able to, like a psychological sigh. That's the one we teach in the morning where you go, and we do this naturally, right? But if you can do it intentionally, your body, and this is what animals do too. If you have a dog, you see this all the time, but they just shake. Yeah. Well, they're trying to clear their nervous system, just like people would do, And so when we learn to do that, that's what the key to movement and why it's so important for the brain. And now they're showing study after study that, back in the 70s when I was growing up, we started working out. We got a weightlifting club at the high school. we had mothers actually petitioning us not to do it, that it was going to stunt our growth, it was going to hurt us.
Yeah.
So they
Yeah.
would, now we all know that we need to do this physical kind of exercise. We're
Yeah.
not farmers anymore. If
Yeah.
we were out working in the fields and doing their thing, I know my relatives in Iowa thought it was funny that I was going running for college. I go, I got to stay in shape. They go, come out on the farm. We'll teach you.
We'll be in shape. Yeah. Yeah. Well, it is funny because we've actually working out is manufacturing work. Once upon a time, that would have been a silly concept, but now in today's sedentary culture, it's essential. Yeah, absolutely love it. All right. So speaking of cortisol, and you had mentioned, hey, working out when you're in this stress state, and we like to talk about an allostatic load, right? You have to be able to out recover all of your stresses, whether that's a biological stress, an environmental stress, a psychological stress, or a physical stress. You got to be able to understand that all those stack up and you have to out recover that. So there, we talk a lot about, recovery. But speaking of recovery, and you had mentioned stress and cortisol, talk to us about the importance then on brain health specifically of, I guess it's two sides of one coin here, but you already mentioned stress, but let's also throw sleep into this. I'm going to guess that both of these are going to be a 10 out of 10 when it comes to brain health. Is that fair?
Yes.
We go. All right.
If there could be a 20, sleep would
If there could be a 20, we'd apply it here. Okay.
Think of sleep is when you do all your neurological cleanup.
Mm-hmm.
When the computers used to stop and say, hey, my RAM is full, you got to reboot. We don't do that. We just keep stuffing it until we get to bed, and then the brain takes over. So if we teach our brain to be efficient, and and they say it seems like too easy, but to add 6.5 years to your life, all you have to do is become a positive thinker. Optimists outlive a pessimist by 6.5 years, because you're turning on, especially during sleep, you want to get as quickly as possible into that healing state. You want to turn on the delta brain. This is another thing for the listeners. In 2015, they found another part of our physiology. It wasn't in any physiology books before 2015. They discovered it during a sleep study that we have something called the glial lymphatic system that everybody talks about now like it's always been around. But if you go back to 2015, it wasn't in any physiology books. What else is laying dormant inside of our body that can help us through these times if we activate them? And sleep is one of the key places, because our genes are always turning off and on. As we're sitting here, every 40 seconds or so, every DNA pair is rebinding. It's either planning this is a safe place and rising to the occasion, or it's going into defense mode saying, hey, this isn't safe for me. And so you're either turning on or off those genes, the 99%. So the 1% stays the same, but that 99% changes all the time. And it's addressed by your environment, by your thoughts, your activities, all of these things. And so it's super important during sleep to get as quickly as possible into that dreamless kind of sleep. That's when the glial lymphatic system opens. And actually in 2015 in American Scientific, they can find it, they call it the garbage man of the system, because it takes out the trash. That's the toxic part. If we don't detox the brain, then we'll have leaky brain, just like people have leaky gut. And if you have a leaky gut, I guarantee you have a leaky brain, because there's a brain biome as well as gut biome. In the gut, by the way, is your biggest brain. It has more neuron connections than the one between your ears. And it's the one making all those neurotransmitters. So that's why gut health, when I say it's that the first, your nutrition is important. If the factory doesn't have the right materials to build out what it needs, it can't do its job. So it's going to start, again, it usually will rob the bones, and, it'll rob the body to make what it needs because it's very intelligent. But then when you get to be 39, 49, 59, 69, 79, you start to, the baker calls and says, hey, you've overdrawn, you need to put some digestive enzymes back in your bank account so you can use them or whatever. So you start taking those supplements, you have to start supplementing. That's why, you can over supplement too. I think, you can be redundant. I'm not an expert at supplementation. I have a couple doctors I rely on, and my brother here, who's our educational director, that's what they spend their whole time on. I just do enough that I can remain healthy and shame myself if I try to do something that I'm not supposed to or something like that. Because you're always challenged. I mean, especially if you travel, you're with family, it's, and I always tell people it's okay to have a treat. I'm not saying never have sugar, but if you do, make sure you have fat, fiber, and protein with it to slow it down so you're not accosting, and it really accosts the brain. And I love it when my mother would say to me, well, sugar can't be that bad. It's on the market. I said, okay, next birthday party you go to, look at all the kids playing and being friendly. They break out the ice cream and cake. All of a sudden you got fights going, you see these terrorizing kids.
Yeah.
They're the same
Chaos
people.
ensues. Yeah.
Yeah. And I said, that's a drug effect. They say if
Mhm.
sugar was to come on the market today, it would have to go through FDA approval. Now, they might have somebody under the table paying them to do that. But the reality is that it's mind altering,
Yeah.
we're being programmed, of course, by our commercials too. Like if we're angry and upset, we must need a Snickers bar or something, and that's not true.
Yep.
What we need is a physiological reboot, maybe
Mhm.
go out and do a walk or do a BrainTap session or meditation or breath work or something. Your physiology is stuck. So when your physiology is stuck, you look for the path of least resistance because we want to get out of that pain that we're feeling, even though it's mostly psychological pain, but your body experiences it the same way you would experience physical pain. That's why, when they say we have a mental health crisis, and this is I don't think we do. We have a physiological crisis. We have a movement.
Mm. Yeah.
Our brains are not designed for the life that we've been given to live today. These brains were designed to be moving and breathing and being creative, being out there. We're designed to be explorers and inventors. And when we sit behind a desk doing the same thing every day or playing games that do the same thing, and we're getting the dopamine hit. Most people don't realize dopamine never rewards you. It only antagonizes you.
Hmm.
No matter what you do, it's kind of like the game of golf. I tell people, you can have your best round and you go, yeah, but back on number 10, I could hit that one a little bit better. You're never good enough. And that's the way life is. So I always tell people, don't worry about what you did yesterday. Worry about what you're doing today, because every meal gives you a chance to reset your metabolism. Between each meal, you have a chance to stoke your metabolism. And your metabolism is what's key, because there's more metabolism in your brain because of the mitochondria than any other area of the body. So if we can get the brain energy up, that will go down the spine, which is the keyboard to the brain, out into the organs, giving you all the energy you need. But if you don't have energy in the brain, and let me kind of put this in perspective so the listeners know, when we measure people here at the lab in New Bern, we bring them in, and when we do a dementia study, every person in the study has a brain voltage under 7. When you and I were born, we had 18.1 volts. At 18.1 volt light bulb. By the time we're 21 to 27, that will drop to 10. That's where it should remain until we die. Now, when it drops below that number, especially below 7, now if it drops below 4, we know you're going to have Alzheimer's. But we also know that exercise, breathing, proper nutrition, light, which we use red light therapy and all of that, we know we can increase brain voltage by doing the right things. Our body is designed to heal, and our brain is part of that. You mentioned neuroplasticity earlier. They used to think we had like this wooden brain and we were born carpenters, or we were born artists, or we were born athletes. And that's not true at all. We're formatted by our environment because that's what we see, hear, and experience every day. But we're not dictated by it if we want to go beyond. Now that takes energy. So even the people working out, they go, how often should I work out? I said, well, a little bit of something's better than a whole lot of nothing. So whatever you can do today, and every day is a new day. You can't count what you did yesterday because the body's already used that energy. So that's why Rod Hairston out of Austin, Texas, he always says there is no there. You're never there.
Right.
But
you don't arrive. It's a journey. Yeah.
Yeah. So you get used to, hey, it's just a matter of this is today. This is different. This is new. And you start looking at it with what they call childlike mind, instead of thinking, oh, it's so bad. So it's all about a long-term vision. And the whole thing is, what are you focused on? I mean, a short-term gratification or long-term health and vitality. And as long as you plan and quiet down that inner critic that tries to tell us, just do what's easy, just do it simple. If it was easy, then we wouldn't be in the crisis we're in. Because easy is sitting in front of the television eating potato chips, but it's not easy when you have to get your health back.
Right.
Right.
So, and the further you get down that road, the harder it is to come back. And look, we talk all the time on this podcast about the difference between the person who is lean, strong, healthy in their 50s, 60s, 70s, and the person who's struggled is really its mindset, right? I think you would agree that if I view eating healthy and working out as this arduous, odious task that I must do, this restrictive mentality in order to get what I want, a lean, strong, healthy body, that's not a prescription for long-term success versus the person who figures out how to become the person who loves I am a healthy person, therefore I do the things that a healthy person would do, and I do them with joy because I am foregoing this momentary hedonistic pleasure most of the time, more often than not, for this long-term aspirational version of myself, my best self. And it's a mindset shift. And with our clients, that's what we say, look, the the macros and the calories and the workouts, that's easy. Anybody can give you that. Heck, AI can give you that today. You don't really need a coach anymore if you know how to prompt those things. What's really the challenge here is just that accountability and that support and that motivation, but more so, what are we doing with that mindset? How are we helping you as coaches collectively? How are we helping you become this new person? Because really telling you to eat this to get this result, that's easy. That's not difficult to do. It's very difficult to maintain long term unless you're that kind of person. So I do think that mindset, that brain health, that positive outlook all plays together on this overall healthy journey. I'm pretty sure you would heartily agree with most of that, right?
Yeah, we call it Monday morning motivation. The first Monday of every new diet. I mean, if we could,
Yeah,
we could bottle that in that enthusiasm, and that's why we have
right.
sessions in the morning. We call them digital coffee. Because
Yeah.
in the morning you have the highest cortisol. Hopefully you had a good
Hmm.
night's sleep. You don't need coffee in the morning.
Hmm.
You should drink your coffee 2 hours after you get up. The reason is when you drink coffee first thing in the morning, you kill something called the cortisol trough. This will kill your motivation and drive, your desire to do anything else the rest of the day. And you'll be addicted to the caffeine because your body won't be able to produce the cortisol. But if you wait 2 hours, your body's okay. You're still getting the chemical factory in your brain, the most powerful pharmacy on earth, to activate neopinephrine, dopamine, cortisol, all those things you need in the morning, your morning cocktail. Now that's when you should be working out. They've proven that during that time, when all the sugar stores are no longer circulating in the bloodstream, the muscles are full of sugar, now you work out, now you get the most BDNF. Now that takes us to the middle of the day. 2 o'clock in the afternoon, every person on earth is going to experience something. They're all going to drop in temperature 2 degrees. Your body's going to biologically reset from the sun, the circadian rhythm. And that sun is beaming codes to us. That's why it's important to be outside or get natural sunlight, because our cells actually respond. We make more melatonin between 10 and 11 than we do any other time of the day. We clean our liver at 11. So if we're not in bed at 11, we're not cleaning our liver as well. And the liver controls 300 functions of the brain. So, I mean, all these things. So in the middle of the day, we do what we call a reboot session with theta. We can actually imitate a cycle of sleep, 4 hours in 20 minutes. Because today people don't have time. They don't have the energy. So we did a study with Googlers and Microsoft users. These are programmers. And I said, they wanted to cure burnout after COVID. And I said, well, just do a BrainTap session in the middle of the afternoon. They said, well, why would we do that? I said, because you're lacking brain energy. That's why your production, every one of them had low production in the afternoon. I said, yeah, most people have low production in the afternoon because they don't have energy. So I said, they said, we can't do it because they get paid by the keystroke, right? I said, just give me 20 minutes. We'll measure it. If you don't like it in 2 weeks, we won't do it anymore. We'll just stop because it wouldn't give me any value anyway. So what happened in 2 weeks, we noticed they were getting 26% more work done. They had energy. Their sleep scores improved 54% because they offloaded the stress in the middle of the day. So now instead of waiting to the end of the day to offload all that stress, now, if you don't have BrainTap, you can do box breathing. This is something they teach the Navy SEALs, and it's really, really good psychologically because you're breathing into the count of 4, you're holding to the count of 4, you're breathing out to the count of 4, hold it out to the count of 4, and you're just focusing on the numbers. So it kind of takes your brain out of whatever emotionally is going on for you, whatever you had to deal with, whatever text or emails or whatever's going on. You clear your mind. And I always say, if it's good enough for them, the Navy SEALs, you got 4 or 5 guys going against a battleship, and
Yeah.
they're some stress, that's a really good one. And then in the evening, like you said, sleep is key, but you start your sleep program in the morning. If you don't win the morning, you don't win the day. So I
Right.
tell, it's like taking a boat across the lake and I'm 10 degrees off when I leave, but I want to get across the lake. I'm going to be 30 to 40 degrees off at the end of the night. So it's important we keep all these things in mind. And then at night, we do our deep delta training. The quicker we can get you to delta. And you can do that through a breathing technique called 4-7 or 4-8, whatever you can do. That means you breathe into the count of 4, you hold it and study any tension in the body, and you breathe out to the count of 7 or 8. And every time you breathe out, you'll find that your body unwinds. Think of every one of your muscles also building up kinetic energy. And we've all had the experience where we're sitting relaxed and then our leg bounces up or our arm, something twitches. Well, those deep muscle stresses are there. If we can learn to unwind our body every night, now we can enter into that deep cycle of rest, relaxation. And like Tom Brady says, for every 1 minute of exertion, you need 2 minutes of recovery. Include your sleep. So when you think about the stress you have during the day, how much sleep do you need? And for the listeners, for longevity, 6.5 hours has been shown to be the best amount of time, but it's efficient sleep, 1 hour of deep sleep and 2 hours of REM sleep.
Right.
We found in our studies with the coal miners too. So as soon as we got them to an hour of deep sleep, and most of these guys were in bed for 10 hours before the study, and they'd only get 1 minute of deep sleep. They weren't sleeping, but they were in bed. So it's not about just being in bed. It's about really getting your brain to do what it's meant to do to help you to get into those deep sleep cycles.
Yeah. Yeah. I love all of that. Certainly on board with that. I love that you brought up getting out in the sun and getting that to help that healthy night's sleep. We really want to invest. And I've actually said many times on this show that I believe that sleep is the foundation of over 50 health. It really is. When you improve that, everything else improves. And to your point, not just so much the hours, but it's that deep sleep and that REM. And you mentioned some good benchmarks there. If you're getting an hour of deep sleep and 2 hours of REM sleep, you're winning. Now, Patrick, I got one more thing I want to throw at you, and then I want to talk about BrainTap specifically. But we've talked about nutrition and exercise and stress and sleep and all that good stuff. What about toxins in the environment? And I'm thinking things here like our household cleaners and the plastic in our water. I'm thinking about all of the toxins that are hiding in our bathroom and the stuff we put on our skin every day. What effect is that? Are there good studies out there that show?
It's a really book called The Inconvenient Truth by Daryl Dolan. And he talks about all these things, and really think of your environment as your first key to health. I mean, this is something that's why they, like, even in ancient sites, they like feng shui, just placement of furniture and energy and things like that. When we look at a pleasing picture, we start to feel good. If we look at our environment now, one of the things, our whole olfactory nerve is the first nerve to be developed in the brain. So when you think about all those chemicals you're talking about, even mold, the brain is going to tell you about them right away. You're going to get a runny nose, you're going to flu-like symptoms. And if you do something about it and realize, hey, these cleaners are hurting me, my immune system has to overwork. Now you'll be tired at the end of the night because you've been fighting this battle all day long with chemicals that you can get rid of and get healthy chemicals, healthier cleaners. But mold is one that once the brain doesn't perceive it as a threat anymore. So we all know people who live next to dumps at some point, and they smell really bad. And you go over there and you go, how can you stand living here? It smells so bad. And they go, I don't even smell it. Or somebody lives near an airport and they go, how can you do it? Those jets flying over? Oh, I don't even notice them. Because the brain is really good at filtering out these things. Now, the problem with that is they're still affecting us. It's like putting a black tape over the idiot light on your car that says, oh, I need the oil. I don't, I'm just going to put this black, and it's kind of like the person who says in our clinics, we have a thing that says, are there any prescription medication? This woman wrote down, she's on 10 different medications, right? But we ask a question on a scale of 1 to 10, where's your health? She put 10. And you put a 10 here is your health, but you're taking 10 different medications. She goes, yeah, that's why I'm healthy. I went, no, that's not why you're healthy. I said, that's why you think you're healthy, but your body is having now to fight off all the toxins from those medicines. And that's the way the brain works. You get what I'm saying? It's like we reason things out, but the reality is it's still affecting us. So I believe that, like in any situation, your set and setting, wherever you spend the most time with should be, I always use air purifiers. We have them in every room or enough to cover the room. I have one in my office that unfortunately we just had the walls painted. That thing goes off, sounds like an airplane going off, because when it gets bad air, you wouldn't even know that. So your house air is really important, and your lungs are so important. That's why I actually have a salt chamber here at the office or one at home, because you can breathe in salt, but that salt opens up the pathways. And a lot of people right now are having respiratory issues out there. It's because of not only the EMF that's happening, because we're being bombarded by that. So when you think about, you're talking about chemicals and things in the air, but we also have these electronic kind of toxins that we have. And the way our cells work, we're getting, like when I told you at 10 o'clock, we start making melatonin. How do we know to do that? The sun is beaming down, even a reflection from the moon or whatever, it's telling our cells because it's hitting us with a frequency. If we could take all the frequency of light, sound, and vibration in the universe, put it on the computer screen, we occupy not even a hair, human hair. But all those other frequencies are hitting us. And they're affecting some way. That's called radiation. So when we get pinged by a 5G tower, that tower is pinging us at 50,000 pulses per second. Our cells are going crazy, trying to figure out what are we supposed to do with this information, because it's never seen information like that before. And what happens is some people will actually shut down. Their body will shut down, or they'll get flu-like symptoms just because the cell tower went up, half a block away. So we have to also, there are technologies like on my phone, there's they shield the antennas, and we've shown the effect on the nervous system. Especially now, 20% of people are ultra sensitive. 80%, I'd say there's 20% like superhuman. They don't even affect them at all. They just, I think I must be one of those because I don't get hit by the EMF bug like some people get. And flying in an airplane too, by the way, is every hour is like getting an X-ray. So the same thing's happening. Our bodies aren't used to being at 50,000 feet, 500 miles an hour. They're going, what the hell? The cells are maybe like, where are we at? I'm not in the right space and time. And then we land, in a whole nother geographic area with other light. I always tell people it's not jet lag, it's light lag. Your body's got to catch up to the signals from the sun because, we're usually just walking around for hundreds of thousands of years. And now we're in automobiles and trains and planes and spaceships, whatever, so our bodies have to learn to adjust to that.
Yeah, 100%. One of my coaches in our practice is fond of saying we're in caveman bodies living in modern times. And that's absolutely true, right? And there's this big disconnect where, as you had mentioned, we've evolved over, say, hundreds of thousands of years. But just in the last 100 years, our metabolism, our brains, our bodies.
Brains in a technological age. I think that's very, because when you think about hedonistic, our brain is still thinking when we see food, we need to eat food, right?
Right.
Because it wasn't too long ago, we were in starvation everywhere.
Right.
So we could rock in any direction, hit a 7-Eleven,
Right.
So
like, DoorDash will bring it right to you, right?
Right. You don't even have to leave anymore. You can stay sitting and deliver the food. So I mean, we have to evolve the way we think about fitness, just like we did with physical fitness. I mean,
brain fitness. Yeah.
And so we include brain fitness with it. And I think then we'll have the emotional fitness we need, because the energy and motion happens between those. I mean, when you're feeling, and I always tell people, it's all about frequency. What frequency are you? So think of, what do you frequently see? That's your frequency. So if you're a high frequency person, you see high frequency foods, high frequency activities, but there's a low frequency people too, and they want to bring you down and they want to eat the bad food. And that's always a choice. But if you keep your frequency, it's almost like, I could have that if I wanted to, but I'm going to say no. Once you have power over it, that's what I'm saying. You need to make superpower. Now that's much easier to do, like you said, if you get a good night's sleep, because you've energized your whole body. They've even taken Formula One drivers and had them basically disrupt their sleep for 3 nights in a row. They could not perform even up to 90% of their selves. That's how important sleep was. Just 3 days of bad sleep, and 2/3 of the world isn't sleeping. So this is a big problem to fix.
Right. I'm with you 100%. All right, Patrick, we talked a lot about just kind of some of these lifestyle things. I think most of those are pretty intuitive for the most part, but we've given people a lot of really good information they can enact right now for their brain health. Like you said, we can build our brain like we build our muscles. I want to switch gears here a little bit, and I want to talk specifically about BrainTap. I obviously, as we were preparing for this interview, I got online, I was looking you guys up, and I'm fascinated by this. So first of all, if you just tell people what BrainTap is, how it works, and tell us who's it for. Who is your ideal customer? Who is the audience that you're trying to sell this to, basically?
First of all, it was designed for pain clinics, because we were trying to figure out this was before opioids, and we actually beat out opioids in Brazil in a study. So, but then in the 80s, when they came out with opioids, in the early 90s, they're like, we don't need any other solution. But the reality is, once we get you out of high beta, that stress state, your body creates its own neurochemicals to reduce or eliminate pain. So and we showed that if you use BrainTap at the same time. So BrainTap is a couple of things. First of all, it's an app that you can download, and we can share the free link. With that free link, you get 14 days of using those 3 times a day. So think of it as training 3 times a day. But at first, we want you to do it 3 times a day. But after the first 21 days, you can just pick one time during the day that you want to do it. If you needed help at night or in the, so we have over 3,000 sessions. So the person we're dealing with could be like, we have school systems all over the world use it. So we use it for accelerated learning. I'm the dean of brain-based medicine at Quantum University for the naturopathic school, where we teach doctors biofeedback and neurofeedback and things. So we have it for that. But sports people use it. Tom Brady's a user. Both quarterbacks who win Super Bowl are users. We have world champion boxers. But most of our users are just like you and me. They just want brain function. They want to have more cognition. They want to keep their brain. The biggest fear today isn't fear of public speaking anymore. It's a fear of losing your brain and your family having to take care of you. Well, I can tell you right now, at least for every study we've done, and we're now in over 100-person study in Florida at Seminole College, every person, when their brain voltage goes above 7, they are no longer in the dementia scale. So it's an energy equation, and it's a combination, not just BrainTap, but BrainTap's part of that solution. Got to get them moving and breathing, got to get them eating the right foods, those kind of things. So then we add on what happened in the 80s is LEDs came out. And there's something called frequency following response. This is the science. So they use it with sound all the time. It's called binaural beats. So we use those in the process. But most people don't realize binaural beats alone don't do it. The brain will treat it like that, like I was talking about, like the sound of an airplane or the dove. People will soon write it off. So we have to change that. So every session has a different variation of the same theme. So the brain cannot learn that. And then we layer that with something called isochronic tones, because we can use this in a room without earphones, but it works best with earphones. And then, so you can do it all with the app that way, as far as that goes. And now we've also put special music in there that is meant to balance the hemispheres of the brain and just make you smarter, just get your brain going more. And then when you add the goggles that we have, the headset, if people go to braintap.com, they're going to see them. That headset, the lights in the eyes, your eyes have more mitochondria than any other place in your body per square centimeter. So your eyes are literally absorbing light and transmitting light. So if you've ever wondered when you're sitting at the couch and somebody behind you is looking at you, turn around and look, it's kind of like that science experiment when you have that black spinner in the middle of the jar and you take it outside and start spinning because the photons hit it. We're sending photons out all the time. Now, the eyes, because we don't get out and see sunrises and sunsets, like there's really magic that happens in those. They've done studies where it resets the gut biome. Just by going out in the morning and seeing the sunrise, you have more energy that day. So we've used flashing lights. Now these lights, we know the frontal lobe, which is the most important part of the brain as we age. It's what, gives us our reasoning power. That's what slows down. And what we find in the dementia brain is that one hemisphere actually slows down before the other. So instead of being matched voltage, if that is not matched, it's like having 2 Wi-Fi networks that aren't communicating. So we need to get them back in coherence. And the best way I can explain that is if people go to YouTube and put in synchronizing metronomes. There's a guy that has 300 metronomes and he starts them all at different times. And within 3 minutes, they're all synchronized. This is your brain, but we found it takes 7 minutes to synchronize the hemispheres in general. So not 3 minutes like a metronome. All the cells on the right and left side of the brain will synchronize. So we have a synchronization pattern. So that's the first part of the training, is how do we get the brain to communicate again once it has the energy, just like when they say, like you're in a sporting event and you have that monkey where you got the motivation. Once you have that motivation, there's like this unseen force helping you. So that's your body. So then what we're going to do is we're going to take you through the different brainwave trainings. Now, what we know, and this is why sleep is so important, when you sleep, you go through cycles. You're not just like in delta the whole time. You're going through alpha, theta, delta, and you're going through the sleep cycle. And if you wake up in a down cycle, you wake up without energy. But if you wake up in an up cycle, you wake up with energy. Well, we can train your brain to always wake you up in an up cycle. The thing is that people are lazy, and we thought nobody taught us how to sleep. They just said, go in there, shut your eyes, go to sleep. But the little process like we went through earlier, if you have the BrainTap on, like when I'm at biohacking conferences and I speak a lot of Dave Asprey's events and that, I always challenge them. I said, any of you want to do your sleep protocol? Fine, I'm going to do whatever I want right up to sleep. I'm going to put my BrainTap on. I'm going to beat you every time. And
Mm.
people research BrainTap. What the thing they're going to find is everybody posts their scores on their HRVs, because even with just the app, 90% of people will have their best night's sleep in 3 nights. So because it's about getting the brain out of that sympathetic drive into that parasympathetic state. Then innate intelligence knows what to do. Your body knows what to do. When we cut our knee when we were little, yeah, we were hurt. We put a Band-Aid on it, but then we let the body do its work. We didn't keep taking the Band-Aid off to see if it was actually healing. The body took over. The same thing's true with the brain. We just have to get the right environments. In light, sound, and vibration. Now, the biggest thing, like in your case, when you talk about metabolism, what happens with red light therapy specifically that we're using in the ears, all the blood in your body goes through your ears every 3 to 5 minutes. So the light is actually being absorbed by the hemoglobin in the body and circulates. Now, the blood from your ears goes directly into your brain. It's what regulates heat and temperature in your brain. So now we can bring energy to the brain through the ears and through the eyes. Now, what happens if you think of a cell, looks like this. In the middle of that cell is your mitochondria, but there could be more than one mitochondria in there, but let's just say one mitochondria. And there's a little guy in there that spins around like a clock. And every time it gets to 12, it spits out an ATP molecule. Well, imagine if you had a way to get that every time that same effort went around, but now instead of one, it was 32 ATP molecules. That's what light therapy does.
Mm.
And that's why the dose we do, a 20-minute BrainTap session, is the same dose as having a 2-minute laser treatment, as far as photons, because your body needs those photons. We are light beings, and that's part of our nutrition. That's why they call it Dr. Sunshine. We need to be out there doing our thing. So what we're going to do is and we've imitated as much as we can, sunrises for the morning sessions and sunsets for the evening sessions. And every cell has these receptors called chromatophores. They actually are like little batteries. And the best way I can explain it to the listeners is you probably went to a party once and you really didn't want to be there, but you were talked into it. But then as you're there at the party, they start playing all your favorite music. You start getting some energy. You start tapping your toes. You start dancing. Your friend comes back. Oh, yeah, I didn't think you wanted to be here. Well, I didn't know they're going to be playing all my favorite music. Well, their cells do it through sound too. We get energy. We get energy from other people. There are people that are gainers and drainers. There are people that when we're with them, after we're done, we feel, hey, I'm energized. This is the greatest thing. And then there's other people who go, man, I'm glad they're gone. They're wearing me out. They basically like an energy vampire. They steal your energy. So you want to be around gainers as much as possible. But BrainTap makes you so that you don't have to get from other people. You have your own energy. So it's all about energy and getting brain energy up. And then, of course, if you have specific problems, we have 200 sessions just for weight loss. When I was featured in People magazine back in 2006, I didn't have a diet. And they said, we sent them over 1,000 people that had lost their weight and kept it off for more than 5 years. And they said, well, what's the diet? I said, it's not what they're eating. It's what's eating them.
Mm.
Now, every time you have a stressful event, what happens? Your liver has 25 grams of glucagon, right? It's like sugar in the liver.
Yep.
So what it does, that's like eating a candy bar. It dumps it into your bloodstream. Now, it was just a text message. It was somebody cutting you off in traffic. It was the fear of something going on in the future. But the liver still pumped out the sugar. Now, we can only have one circulating tablespoon of sugar in our bloodstream, right? Or we have toxemia. So now the insulin pump has to kick on. Now, if you have chronic stress, this is why people that don't eat sugar get diabetes, because they don't have nobody has a carbohydrate deficiency. The body creates its own sugar. The problem is we're over medicating ourselves with sugar. And now the body doesn't just turn on the insulin pump when we have sugar in the system. It says, I'm just going to keep this thing dripping. Now, that insulin is a fat storage hormone, right? So what it does, it signals to all the fat cells, start gobbling up all the sugar. And then the vicious cycle starts.
Yeah.
So that's why if you can control our emotions, keep them more balanced, don't let the highs get us too high and the lows get us too low, and stay in that middle turf, and then eat properly, now we become fat burning machines. And you will have more energy than you ever thought possible, because there's stored energy in those cells. But if we never tap into them, it just keeps storing because it thinks there's going to be a famine down the road. It's protecting us. It's not like your body's turned against you.
Right.
Your body's doing exactly what it's designed to do.
Right. Yeah.
We just have to work with the design.
Yeah, no, that's well put. We have to work with the design. And at this point, the design seems to be working against us in this new food environment, stress environment. So what do we do? And that's where people like you out there kind of on the forefront are harnessing technology to help us overcome tech. So technology could both be our savior and our downfall, right?
Right.
Yeah,
We need to either protect yourself or go commit murder,
Yeah.
so technology has always been like that. So
Right.
I
Right.
always thought I'm not going to get people to do something they're not going to, it's got to be fun and novel for neuroplasticity, right? So you can't be something arduous. Some people will get into the weightlifting and they'll just all holds barred and go for it. But most people are going to just want something they can work into their lifestyle, give them better energy so they can spend better time with their family and friends. They can think in the evening and wake up in the morning with a great night's sleep. I mean, that's the reward for most people.
Right on. Yeah, I love it. All right. Well, Patrick, as we're wrapping up here, let me ask you a question here. Given the state of our current society, culture, just our declining health, that's mental health, emotional health, spiritual health, and certainly metabolic physical health, a couple questions here. One, are you optimistic that we're going to turn this around? And two, whether you are or aren't, what's the role of technology moving forward? Since you're kind of out here on the forefront of technology as a biohacker or a health technology guy, what do you see coming in the future? Is technology going to save us? Where
Yeah,
are
I think
we?
it's yeah, I think it's going to be a combination. I think that where we're headed is there's not going to be. It's just I always say you can't have the pill without the skill. So
Hmm,
everybody wants the pill. They don't
yeah.
want to do the skill. It's all about the skills. It's lifestyle skill. So think of how you can build a life that gives you the energy to do the things you need to do. And I think technology can help manage that. Like if you don't know that you're not sleeping well, pick up your technology to do that. There's so
Mhm.
many photography watches and whoops and rings, you know, find out because if you can't just deny it. And what you'll find, you burn more fat also while you sleep than while you're awake. If you night sleep, you actually burn more fat than a workout. But you can do that every night. You can only work out every 72 hours to keep your nervous system and muscles going. So, there's those things you can do. And I think technology does have a role to play. But if people are looking for technology saviors like Chat GPT or something like that,
Mhm.
they're only as smart as the input that's put into them. And I love it. I love what it can do for research. But if you don't know what you're talking about, it can give you back some really bad information.
Yeah.
And I've never looked at it for health advice. I was just on Fox being interviewed about that because it was telling people to commit harm to their bodies because it's one way to get rid of the pain and pressure. So we have to look at all things and realize that we have the greatest technology. You have a 100 billion neural bit processor. You have a nervous system that's thinking, responding to your environment, a DNA system that actually is pulling in information from the center of the galaxy, they say, transmitting it through your body to tell you what to do in space and time. And the thing is, we got to tune into our own physiological technology, and then our psychology will be fixed because we one is never separated from the other. Very rarely we'll find somebody who's eating, like I said, low frequency foods, doing low frequency activity. They're not just going to become this happy go lucky person. And the happy go lucky person who's eating all the healthy foods and doing all these things, and then somebody tries to bring them down. Yeah, that might knock them down for a day, but they'll forget about it. It's kind of like being a quarterback in the NFL. They say you have to have a short memory. If you have a mistake, so what? Don't shame all over yourself. Get rid of the negative emotion. I mean, I was brought up with it, like I said, that we perfected it at the Catholic Church. But it doesn't serve us physiologically. It's what are we going to do to change that? How can I take whatever I did today is a lesson? So if this is the optimistic way of thinking, even if the worst thing happened to me, there must be something good going to happen. Like the old story of the kid getting a little box of horse dung, and then he goes out to the barn and starts digging. And they say, "What are you doing?" He says, "There's got to be a pony here somewhere." You
Yeah.
got to be that little kid that goes and looks for the pony because there is all things work for good. Like Steve Jobs said, when we look at our past, we can't put the dots together going forward, but we can put together the thoughts going backwards. And brain fitness is a key. Keeping your brain, there's no day like today to start that program because when it's gone, if it gets to a point where it can't be re-engaged, then it's just going to run its course. And too many people are getting dementia symptoms in their 30s. This is diet and movement. When I was growing up, my relatives in Iowa, they were 90s, 100 years old, playing cards every Friday night, counting the cards, they were smart people.
Sharp as
But
a tack. Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't know any of our relatives that had anything with like dementia. And we had big families, 8 to 10 kids per family, and the relatives get together and everybody was, I mean, they weren't always social, they were sometimes, bullheaded because they were farmers or whatever, but they knew they could have conversations, that's so important. And I think a lot of it is socialization. People are missing. we need more than friends on Facebook. We need physical people to communicate with, to keep our brain active. We need connection. There's
100%.
saying that all addiction is isolation. So, but if we have connection, we find a community. That's why coaches are so important too. And I have coaches. I mean, I think everybody needs somebody, because you get too caught up in your own stuff. You need somebody who can get it from the outside and
have that objective view. Yeah, 100%. Absolutely love it. Well, all right. I think we're going to leave it there. That's beautifully said. I think that's a great way to end here. So, Patrick, why don't you tell people how they can connect with you, how they can learn more? Certainly, if somebody's interested in BrainTap, where do you want to send them? I think you've got a new book coming out, so hit us with all the good stuff.
Yeah, I'll start with I have a new book called Brain Fitness Blueprint. Mm-hmm. Everything and more what I talked about here is in that book. Hay House is putting it out. It's going to come out in October, and that'll be exciting. But if they can go to brainfitness.com, and there's a pre-sale, and you can get $99 worth of free bonuses for pre-ordering the book, in a course called Brain Fitness that I designed for the college that I made available to everybody who does that, so they can learn about it. And then they can also go to braintap.com. That's where they can get the 15-day free trial. And if it won't cost you anything. If you don't like it, within 10 days, cancel it. You will not be charged. But the thing is to do it 3 times a day to get the experience. And then if they want to follow me, it's Dr. Patrick Porter on all the social media channels. And I have a lot of videos on YouTube that they can watch, and interviews, and times I've been on other podcasts like yourself.
Okay, fantastic. And folks, I will make sure I put all of Patrick's information, all his socials, where you guys can pre-order the book, BrainTap, and what was the other one? The brainfitness.com. I'll make sure all of that is in the show notes. You guys can find that on whatever app you're listening to this on, or of course over at the website. So Patrick, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show today, sharing all your knowledge and your wisdom with us, but especially just I can feel that your heart is in this. I love that you have decided to champion brain health, and really encourage you to keep up the great work, man.
Thank you.
Okay, that's our show for today, folks. If you're interested in learning how the Silver Edge Collective program can help you feel lean, strong, and confident again, you can find a link to learn more in the show notes for this episode. You guys can find that on whatever app you're listening to this on, or head over to silveredgefitness.com/377. As we wrap up our time together today, you can show your support for this show in 2 important ways. The first is to tell a friend about this podcast and encourage them to give it a listen. The second is for you YouTube folks to click the like and subscribe buttons, and for you podcast folks to please give this podcast a 5-star review on whatever platform you listen to podcasts on, and be sure to subscribe and follow so you don't miss any future episodes. I really appreciate you spending your time with me today, and until next time, stay strong.